Well, we're changing gears here a bit periodically on Bay Focus, and it's not often because the show doesn't lend itself to that. We do more community events, but now and then I feel so strongly about a book that we bring an author in and we highlight the book, and that's the case today. The name of the book, I'm going to read the full title, is Eat, Pray, Get Well, A Journey from Chronic Illness, Brokenness, and Junk Food to Wholeness and Wellness. I love that because it covers just about everything.
Yeah.
And we have with us today the author of this book, Erin Porter. Thank you so much for coming, Erin.
Thank you for having me.
I have to tell you that this is such a unique book. And before we get into it, because it's recipes, it's life lessons, it's her testimony, all in one. And we'll give you the method of the book in just a moment. I literally could not put it down. It was so interesting. But Erin, why did you write this book? This was very personal.
It was very personal. I think in my very early 20s, God put something on my heart. It just kind of showed me a vision that I was going to write a book. Well, that seemed impossible to me because what could I possibly have to say? I had an abusive sort of childhood that you can read in the book. And I didn't have really much going on for myself in my early 20s, so it took a couple of decades before God unraveled exactly what would be in that book. And it's divided into 3 parts. It's emotional health, and I take you through the journey of my difficult childhood, and physical health, because I spent most of my life chronically ill, and I go into detail in the book. And then lastly, spiritual health, and where did God fit in? Where was he through my difficult journey?
Yeah, well, okay, and what I want to say too with the book, what she does, because we're going to get into this, is this book is broken up. You did it three different parts, but in each one of those parts as well, you have recipes, because ultimately, God led you into physical wholeness through getting to the absolute root of your physical problems. All right, you touched on it briefly. Take us, you grew up, you experienced abuse. You had a difficult relationship with your father.
Yes.
And then how did all of a sudden physical problems start coming as well?
And it wasn't physical or sexual abuse. It was a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
It was the circumstances were unique. So I felt like it was important to put it in the book with short stories so you can get sort of a feel of what my childhood was.
Yeah.
And I moved from the Bronx at 6 years old, upstate, into a house, and we didn't know it at the time, but it had mold issues. And we used to joke, you know, the house smells like mold, but we never really thought anything of it. And I instantly came down with pretty severe asthma, allergies. We just thought, a lot of kids get asthma and allergies. And then at 18, I took a job in Manhattan and moved out on my own. And here I am again in I took the least expensive place I can find. So it had, you know, mice, it had New York roaches, but it also had mold. And again, even though it was visible, I didn't think much of it. And I was in that apartment for 9 months, and it almost completely took my health out from under me. And even after I moved, it took decades to get well.
What were the symptoms? What were you having?
My
had the
first,
asthma.
right, so I took that along with me, and then within a couple days of moving in, I got my first sinus infection, never had one before. And a year later, I was still being treated for that same sinus infection with antibiotics nonstop. And about a year into the antibiotics, I remember I was about 19, 20, standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus, and I could barely hold myself up. I could barely speak. And their chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia were not words, you know, spoken back in the early 90s. Doctors didn't even really believe that existed. And then came heart arrhythmias. And I spent about 20 years with heart arrhythmias, sometimes hospitalized for them. And at one point they wanted to do an ablation to see if my symptoms would get better. And restless leg, I mean, there wasn't a part of my body that wasn't affected. My reflux was so severe that I would have sores on my esophagus. And so I always thought all these symptoms were unrelated. I didn't know there was a whole picture. So instead of enjoying the city, you know, at 18, I was on my lunch running from doctor to try to figure out
And none
different
of them
specialists.
Connected the dots.
More antibiotics,
Yeah.
more suggestions of pharmaceuticals. So I went on to have 4 sinus surgeries. I went on to have my tonsils out, you know, as an adult, and my adenoids. And I spent a lot of time at doctors' offices and having surgeries, and I never got.
Because we have so much to talk about, I'm going to take you there. There was a point now where suddenly you came in connection with an individual, and I think some of our viewers are going to know who this is. Thinking of the diet of the Doug Kaufman, right? Yeah.
Right.
And you suddenly started getting some, and I may be taking things out of sequence, but you started getting some insight. What eventually got you out of that cycle?
Well, I'll back up just a tiny bit. And maybe a few years into being ill, my early 20s, I was crying out to God.
Yeah.
And I said, please show me what is wrong with me. You know, I was watching other people my age having fun and going out, and my focus, it was tunnel vision. I needed to get well. And I remember, it's in the book, I was eating a Hostess cupcake, and just as I was sobbing, just shoving it, you know, in my mouth, because I was a binger too. I never threw up, but I could never get enough food. It's like I was trying sugar, trying to fill a void. And that was the first time God dealt with me about my diet, how it was contributing. It didn't cause the problem, but it was definitely contributing. So I'll fast forward to I was about to go on my 4th sinus surgery. I decided to get a new ear, nose, and throat. Unfortunately, he passed on now, but he was a wonderful doctor. And he took a look at my CAT scan, and he said, you have one of the most severe fungal infections I've ever seen. And I thought, I've always been told, I had very difficult bacteria to get rid of. I had Pseudomonas and I had staph, 2 that are once you have them, even antibiotics, it's very tough to knock them out. So I thought, well, that's it made me kind of excited because, okay, I have something else to work with. I already know I had these 2 other things that nobody can seem, the best ear, nose, and throat can't help me with. So I decided I'm going to learn everything I could about fungus, about mold, and how it affects your body. And come to find out, it's cardiotoxic. It's toxic to your nerves. It's toxic to your digestion. So I started putting this all together. My arrhythmias were caused by a systemic fungal infection. And once I actually had that information, I found Doug Kaufman, who has a show called Know the Cause.
Yeah.
And he dedicates the whole half hour to fungus and how it can mimic diabetes and cancer even. And he was talking about sinus infections being fungal in nature. And I thought, okay, God, you're sending me, you know, new information that I needed. I learned I had to go on antifungals, not concentrate so much on the antibiotics, because bacteria are opportunistic. As long as that fungus is there, the bacteria is going to be there. Let me try something different and go after the fungal infection. So I did, and I spent some time on nebulizers with antifungals, but I had to change my diet, not knowing carbs and sugar feed fungal infections, which ironically they also feed cancer.
Yeah. Knew some of that with cancer.
Yeah.
And that's been out there, but this is
Right.
for everything else you were experiencing. None of the other doctors even took a look at a fungal infection.
Never.
And then truthfully, it was new to me. I've been through some of those sinus infections with all the antibiotics. When I read through that, it was so enlightening to me. But how diet, it's not like you can take a pill and it goes away. The antifungals can help, but you still have to change your diet and your lifestyle, which is why this book is so important and holding it up, because you talk about that and you have several recipes in there. What had to, obviously the sugar and some things you mentioned, but that's a whole new way that you had to eat. The recipes they're gluten-free, right?
Gluten-free, sugar-free, no corn, no peanuts in there.
Yeah.
No wheat. And when God first told me that I have to change my diet, it took a couple years, because not only was I so addicted, not only to the sugar, but to that feeling, it gave me some relief maybe from emotional pain,
Yeah.
now looking back.
Yeah.
And I had no clue. I remember walking down the aisles of a health food store. I don't know what I'm supposed to eat. I don't know how to put these weird ingredients together. So along with my journey, I wanted to make it easier for people if they want to start eating healthy. Here's the list of ingredients, and here's 60 recipes of what you can do with them. You can still have great desserts and pizza and the things that you love to eat, but just make them in a way that
Yeah.
they're full of nutrition and that they don't feed cancer, they don't feed fungal infections.
I have to tell you, when I looked at some of these recipes, I would just like to try these recipes, period. Whether you're fighting a...
Exactly.
I mean, they're
they're
so
delicious.
delicious.
If they weren't, I wouldn't have been able to stick to the diet.
And where would you say, because I want to just do a quick run through the book, but where would you say, all right, and I keep saying, I'm going to get to it, I better just get to it or then I'll forget. But like her first, like she mentioned, the first one is emotional health. And she talks at first in the beginning of it, abuse comes in all forms. And she goes into her story a little bit on that. And then she goes into recipes, healing soups. What a great way to say that, coming off of abuse. And she goes on all these really great soups. And then she has main dishes for that as well, all along that same theme. And then she has part 2, physical health. And she says, what is your body trying to tell you? And then she talks about that. Then she goes into breakfast recipes, breads, drinks, and then spiritual health. And I want to get to this. God's plan for all of us. And she talks about, why does God let us suffer? There's all different subjects in each one of these. That's what I'm saying. You're going to hear from her first on the things she's walked through and the lessons she's learned. And then she gets into recipes like desserts, recipes, snacks and sides. And it's full colored photos, everything throughout. It's a beautifully put together book.
Thank you.
There's somebody that had a huge impact on your life. Charles Stanley.
Yes.
Dr. Charles Stanley.
Yes.
Talk to us about the spiritual element here.
And I dedicated my book to Charles Stanley. And I always forget that Doug Kaufman from Know the Cause wrote the foreword
Yeah.
to the book.
Yeah.
I dedicated it to Charles Stanley, and I actually got to meet him 4 years ago and tell him so. And God knew that that was a desire of my heart. I found Charles Stanley in my early 20s. I was completely broken.
Yeah.
I thought when I left my home at 18 that everything was going to be fine. But I didn't have any self-esteem. You carry the abuse with you. It's
Yeah.
not like you leave and it's gone. So I had a lot of healing to do, not just in my body, but in my mind and my emotions. I thought I was nothing. I remember starting my job in Manhattan and being too shy to say hello to people. So I was practically catatonic when I started that job. People would joke, does she speak? And so I had a lot of healing to do, and I found Charles Stanley in my early 20s, and the very first segment or sermon he was talking about was how an abusive father affects a girl, a woman. And I just remember crying and not being able to wait till next Sunday when I can watch another one. And I never stopped watching. And then for 15 years I had a job I didn't like, a desk job, so I would plug in and listen to Charles Stanley 6-7 hours a day.
Wow.
I would fall asleep next to my pillow and listening to it on my phone, and it renewed my mind. Charles didn't renew my mind, but he actually brought me to a relationship with God, showed me scripture, taught me God will speak to you. I never knew God would speak to me. I thought you pray and you walk away and it's a disconnect. And my world started changing because God did speak to me. And I started realizing that book, he did speak to me in my early 20s. It just wasn't time yet. And then a few years ago, I knew it was time. I was praying and I said, what else can you do with me? I can't do this job that I hate much longer. And it was start a blog. So it started with the blog.
You do have a blog, you get that out there.
Yeah, eatpraygetwell.com.
Yeah.
And then within 3 months, I had a national TV show calling me to interview me. And I said, God, no, I can't. I was okay behind computer. No one can see me. No one knows who I am. I was so incredibly shy. And I know when God tells you to do something, it's going to be big and it's going to be good. And so I said, I'll do it, God, but I don't know how. I don't know what I'll say. I was never good at public speaking. I ran from public speaking. So for 3 days before I went on that show, at home, I was hyperventilating. Even to my family, I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And I said to my husband, I said, my mic's going to be right here, and you're going to just hear me hyperventilating. And that's all I thought about. And I said, okay, God, if I pass out, if I hyperventilate, I tried. And I was so comfortable, I realized as soon as the camera went on, it was a miracle. I just kept saying,
Well,
God,
yeah.
you promised in Luke 12:12, I believe, you promised that the Holy Spirit will give us the words at the right time.
Yeah. And the Lord's opened many doors for you to share this on in media, television, and to share the story, because I think there's a lot of people who've walked through. We're down to our last few minutes. You're well now. I mean, you have got a plan down. You've managed all your physical. Do you feel well? Do you feel you've come through it?
I feel great. I still have some weaknesses in my sinuses.
Yeah.
If I eat the wrong foods for too
Right.
long, if I go somewhere that's moldy.
Right.
But I feel wonderful. I have my life back.
That is an incredible story. One other thing I want to leave our guests with you. In the last few moments we have left, number one, how they can connect with you, get the book, connect you, but also you do, from the proceeds of the book, you give back.
Yes.
Tell our viewers what you're
I
doing.
promised God when my book came out, I would give 10%, I would tithe 10% of my book. And I do have a couple charities I like, but I like to see with my own eyes. I like to be alert to who needs. So I do carry cash. I probably shouldn't say that. I carry cash in my car, but not, a little bit when it's time to tithe. And my son, he just turned 16, and I say, look around, open your eyes, because we have money to give away today. So sometimes it's a homeless person, or sometimes it's just a feeling you get. This is the person, whether it's somebody in front of you online or, you know. Sometimes it takes a couple days, you're driving around, I haven't really seen anybody. So we like to do it that way. That's our favorite way to give.
That's just, I think that's a tremendous thing, and that you're reaching out, looking for needs to meet. You've involved with Bible studies. What I would say, too, if somebody's watching, Erin, and they're going through all this, should they not, first of all, they need to get your book, and I keep putting up, they need to get your book. We're going to show that again in just a moment, but should they bring this up if they're getting nowhere to their doctor? Do they need to say to their doctor,
Yes.
check for fungal infection?
There's something exciting that came out from the CDC about 2 years ago, and it said if you are suffering from chronic disease, conventional medicine is not helping, talk to your doctor about fungal infection. That was huge for the CDC to say that.
Yeah, and you had
Center
to,
for Disease Control.
Yeah, and you had to go through it for years.
Oh, yeah.
To get to that
25,
point.
30 years.
You call the CDC and go, yeah, guys, you're a little late.
So
I've
that's pretty
been
exciting.
through this. All right, I can't say it enough, but I think it's just that we flew through this. There's so much. If people get to the book, your story, the instances of what you went through in your childhood, how you have a wonderful husband today, how he's been so supportive. You deal with some difficult spiritual questions and truths there through your journey. So I want people to get it. Thank you, Erin, so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
And thanks for, you contacted me, I think a couple times, and you said your viewers need to hear this. So,
and I want them to know they can contact me through my website.
Yes.
There's a way to contact me.
That's the best way.
And my book is on my website as well as Amazon, and in
Amazon.
some stores, Tampa International Airport bookstores.
And your blog, they can find you through the website as well.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Erin, so much. Stay tuned. We're going to show you on the screen once again how you can contact and get the book, and we'll be back with more Bay Focus. Hello, my name is Darlene Greenlee, and I want to invite you to join us each week on Bay Focus. We are going to highlight local ministries, community organizations, events, concerts. Reporter Brooke Rathmel goes behind the scenes to get the interviews you want to see. I hope you will join me each week on Bay Focus. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in today to Bay Focus. I hope you'll get Erin Porter's book, Eat, Pray, Get Well. It's powerful. Like I said, I could not put it down. And then all the organizations here in the area that are reaching people at this time during the pandemic, meeting the needs of people. Thank you so much, Feeding Tampa Bay, for taking time out of a very busy schedule they had that week and to sit down with Brooke, and we so appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Keep us posted on what's going on in the community. God bless you. We will see you next week.